discusses the importance of enthusiasm. It's contagious, and he'll tell you how to transfer your own enthusiasm for your product or service to your prospects through what you say and what you don't say with body language. Tom will show you how something as simple as eye contact builds that needed trust for your prospects to feel comfortable saying yes more often. Next, Tom talks about how to harness the power of using names in your presentation. Name dropping will build the necessary credibility to close early and close often. Tom gives specific examples of the advantages that you'll gain by the frequent use of names in your presentation. Then he shows you how you can gain a competitive advantage by knowing your competitors' products as well as you know your own. You know, for 30 years, Tom has trained salespeople with the mindset that spectacular performances are always preceded by unspectacular preparation. And that's why he devotes time in this next section to teaching you how to build what is called the buying atmosphere. And that's an environment where the prospect feels comfortable to say both yes and no to your product or service. Now, nobody wants to be sold, so it's your job as the salesperson to create that buying atmosphere where potential buyers don't have that fear of getting sold.
No one said it would be easy. In building a fantastic presentation, you must adopt equally solid sales techniques. Every great professional develops special techniques that are not natural. In tennis, no one holds the racket on the backhand like the pros. Golf requires unnatural grips and swings. Lawyers learn negotiation and questioning techniques that aren't natural. If you're a religious person, you know sometimes your faith requires unnatural behavior. In the medical field, it goes without saying there is a learned behavior required. Don't use the "it doesn't feel natural" excuse. Demand excellence of yourself, and this doesn't happen naturally. Sales techniques are really just good communication skills. Somehow techniques have gotten a bad rap because people classify them as tricky. As long as you truly and sincerely believe the prospect will benefit from the product at the price you're asking, then there's no trickery. As long as there is nothing but truth as you know it in your communication, then there is no trickery. You must be the best communicator you can. Your prospects know you're not here to save the dolphins. Your goal with these techniques is to make it easy for them to buy. Another element of enthusiasm is body language. Motion creates emotion. In countless sales presentations, I've witnessed salespeople sit back in their chairs and talk to prospects from across the desk. These salespeople are working against themselves. If you're presenting to someone across the desk, get on the edge of your chair, lean forward, and animate your gestures to the point of feeling a little ridiculous. And act enthusiastic. If you're presenting to a group and they're all seated, then stand up. It's hard not to be enthusiastic when you're standing. Although I've seen some of my college professors and a few preachers pull it off, just decide to get animated and get excited. A common question people ask me is, how do I sound enthusiastic? Remember that most people think about 3 times faster than they speak. I've noticed that enthusiastic and confident people speak faster. So despite the misconception that slow and steady is always the best approach, speaking faster can make you sound more enthusiastic and hold a prospect's attention better. You can speak faster if you know exactly what you're going to say. This emphasizes the importance of a planned and well-rehearsed sales talk. The bottom line is this: am I transferring my enthusiasm for my product to my prospect? Enthusiasm is in. Let's talk about some specifics that great people use to make the sale. Enthusiasm is crucial. Remember our definition of selling, that sales involves a transference of feeling. If there's no enthusiasm in your voice, there can be no real transference of feeling. Some consider women to be instinctively better at this than men. Men learn from an early age that it's not cool to be enthusiastic. However, companies don't pay salespeople to get their cool cards punched. You're paid to make sales, and enthusiasm is important to that process. Greg Daly is one of the most successful entrepreneurs I know. He's worth well over $100 million. For over 20 years, I've always heard him answer the question, "Greg, how's it going?" in the same way. Fantastic. Trust me, it's not always fantastic for Greg, but he recognizes the power of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is created in a number of ways. One is through your vocabulary. When people ask me how I'm doing, I say healthy, happy, and terrific. How do you answer that question? Start being enthusiastic in your answer to this basic question. A second way to be enthusiastic is to use words that require you to be enthusiastic. Words like great, fantastic, awesome, wow, magnificent, amazing, tremendous, outstanding, unbelievable, wonderful, excellent. These words make you sound enthusiastic and are hard to say with any conviction without creating some enthusiasm in your voice. If you're not enthusiastic naturally, then focus on it and practice using these words and others. If you act enthusiastic, you'll become enthusiastic. Nodding your head is one of the most effective ways to get your body talking. With the simple nod of your head, you send positive vibes to your prospect. It also reinforces your own commitment to what you're saying and selling. Try this. Have some fun with your friends by nodding your head up and down, and then ask them to shake their head no. They'll find it's very difficult to do. This is the same positive impact you have on your prospect when you're nodding your head yes. Many times your prospect will start nodding his head with you, and this is a good thing. After all, verbal no's are much harder to say when your prospects are busy saying yes with their heads. Allow me to dispel a myth believed by many salespeople. It is not unnatural to be enthusiastic. I've heard salespeople tell me, it feels unnatural. Of course it does. But what's natural about calling someone you don't know or knocking on the door of a total stranger? You must practice it until it becomes second nature to you. Then it feels natural. Enthusiasm is not just a tone you portray in your presentation, it's a lifestyle. It works better if it's just part of your life. It's not something you can just practice in your professional life and turn off when you go home. It's something you must practice in every aspect of your life. Don't be the kind of person who brightens a room when you leave. Be the kind of person who brightens a room when you arrive. A good way to determine the level of enthusiasm you display is to measure your enthusiasm to your prospect's level of interest. It's very possible to overwhelm the prospect with too much enthusiasm. It's extremely rare, but if you're in a presentation and your prospect is actually fighting your enthusiasm, lower yours until they get on board. As a general rule of thumb, however, I'd rather be too enthusiastic than not enthusiastic enough. When you fix dinner for your friends, it's much better to have too much food than not enough, right? Eye contact is a technique that seems so simple and is just plain common sense, but it shouldn't be taken for granted. When you meet prospects for the first time or any time, shake hands, look them in the eye. Catch their gaze for a moment. This builds trust and shows confidence on your part. No one buys from someone they don't trust, and confidence on your part is transferred to the prospect when you look them in the eye. When you begin your presentation, make sure that your visual aids don't prevent eye-to-eye contact, especially when you ask questions. When prospects ask you questions, look them in the eye. This is really important. Think about it. When you ask someone a question and the person won't look you in the eye, you don't trust the response. A smile can often make more of an impact than a dictionary full of fancy words or phrases. It's one of the most simple yet most powerful physical gestures you possess. I've often heard it said, a smile is the nicest gift you can give someone. I couldn't agree more. You should be smiling from the time you walk in the door until you leave. Like enthusiasm, this should become a way of life. We remember people who smile at us, and it can even make our day. Kim Kirkpatrick was the most popular girl in my high school. She wasn't the prettiest or the smartest, but she had a smile for everyone, and it always brightened me up to see her flash a smile my way. It's very hard not to return a smile. Try it. You can have some fun with people. They'll wonder if they know you, or they'll wonder what you're up to. You don't want to be like the man who got beat up outside the restaurant. When the police came, they asked the man, "Can you describe the man who did this to you?" And the victim replied, "That's what I was doing when he hit me." A smile will disarm your prospect and make you feel better too. Just ask yourself, do I like people who smile better than those who don't? Again, it isn't natural, but it's a skill that can be learned. Learn it. The most powerful resource in selling is the third-party influence. Names, names, and more names. Nothing gives prospects confidence more than hearing someone else they know bought the product and likes it. So how do you introduce names, individuals, or companies to a prospect in order to get the desired effect? Well, in the book business, I read a list of 50 to 100 names of people who had bought from me before I ever demonstrated the books. When the prospect identified the ones they knew, I made a comment or a mental note. Then as I gave my presentation, I used the names that had been identified, and I also used those same names in the closing process and when answering objections. In the banking business, I learned quickly that banks don't buy anything without references. They believe the pioneers get arrows in their backs, not rewards. A bank doesn't want to be a pioneer in the banking world, but they do want references of banks that were pioneers. Here is how I handled this mindset in the banking industry to successfully introduce 10 different products that were new and relatively untested at the time. After I established rapport and did fact-finding to create or find a need, I handed them a laminated sheet with a list of the banks in the area that had bought my company's services. As they looked at the list, I made a mental note of the ones they said they knew or at least knew of. And those were the names I used throughout my presentation. You cannot use too many names in a presentation, and here's how I recommend names be used. First, use them to introduce a feature or a benefit. Here are two examples. One thing Bill King liked about the program was how easy it was to administer. Let me show you how that works. One of the benefits Bill King liked about the program was how quickly he could get started. The other way to use names is to answer objections in the presentation before they are voiced. If price is a common objection you're hearing, then introduce price in the presentation like this. Now here's how we get paid. I bet you'll like this. Steve Counts was surprised at how reasonable the program is. In a few instances, prospects have told me during a presentation that they're just not interested in hearing who else bought. If your prospect appears genuinely disinterested in hearing other names, be wary of the use of names in your presentation. However, you'll find these instances will be the exception and not the norm. So don't let one prospect's objection shower you on the idea. Make it a point to use one or two names at each and every feature or benefit in the presentation. Make yourself do this. Start with only one name and build it up to 10 names and more. This technique will help every aspect of your presentation because of the trust and credibility it builds. Know your enemy, the competitive advantage. Knowledge of the competition is essential to reaching the goals you set for yourself. When I was selling books door to door, I looked at every competitive product in every person's home I could find. It took some extra time, but like Zig Ziglar says, you can't be too busy chopping wood to sharpen the axe. When I sold products to banks, I subscribed to 23 banking publications, and I paid for them myself. Why did I invest so much time and money on looking at competitive products and reading trade publications? There are two reasons. I wanted to know my competition, and I wanted to know my industry. There's a reason that every great coaching staff in sports watches films of the competition. The great hitters in baseball watch films of the great pitchers, and the pitchers watch films of the great sluggers. It's impossible to find or create needs for a prospect if you don't know what those needs might be. You can get a real jump on the game if you know what's happening in your industry. I can't stress enough how the quality of your presentation will improve if you know what is happening on an industry level. John was the #1 salesman for used airplanes in America. After talking to him, I was convinced that he didn't know much about the sales process. But he did know this: the capabilities of every airplane on the market, as well as every airplane that was for sale in the United States. He did his homework so that he could speak to his prospects with confidence, knowledge, and an ability to meet his customers' needs. If knowledge is not a talent, then it's a great substitute. When combined with skill and talent, it's unbeatable. Be sure you've seen your competitor's proposals, promotional materials, and if he's any good, your direct competitor's name. Now, I'm talking about the salesperson, not the company. Duh. Bill Thompson was my competitor. Now he's a friend. In competitive situations, he always wanted to go last in front of the prospect or a group of prospects. After losing several sales to Bill, I caught on. From then on, I preempted that maneuver at every occasion. I either went last or asked for one last shot if I knew Bill's presentation was following mine. If Bill did follow me, I made sure the prospects were prepared not to make a decision until I had my last shot. I didn't lose to Bill anymore. Never underestimate the competition. American Airlines told themselves Southwest Airlines was a low-cost provider. General Motors and Chrysler did the same thing. Now Toyota and Honda have moved ahead. Sears thought they could give up the low-end customers to Walmart. Walmart drove Sears to the brink of failure and bankrupted Service Merchandise, a $4 billion company with 375 stores. How can anyone call himself a professional if he doesn't know the competitor's products and sales strategies as well as he knows his own? Don't accept defeat graciously, even occasionally. It forms a bad mental habit that it's okay to lose once in a while. It isn't. 3 stores on the main street of town stood side by side. They all sold the same merchandise. One day, the owner of the store at one end put up this sign, "Rock bottom prices." This prompted the storekeeper at the other end to hang up a sign that read, "Lowest prices in town." Well, the owner of the store in the middle was thrown by these aggressive maneuvers until he had a bright idea. He put up his own sign which proclaimed, "Main entrance." Like the owner in the store, you must find a way to write "main entrance" on your product line or service. There's always a way to outsmart the competition if your head's in the game. Know your competition, but never cuss or badmouth them. Competition makes you better and ultimately helps the customer win. And unless the customer's winning, ultimately none of us as salespeople will win. Can you imagine Pete Sampras winning 14 Grand Slam tennis tournaments without Andre Agassi or Jim Courier? Of course not. Competition will drive you to new heights of performance and service. Great presentations also come from having organized materials. I've actually been in several presentations with salespeople where the prospect was ready to buy and there was no contract or order to be found. The salespeople would say things like, "I gave my last brochure away yesterday and I forgot my proposals when I left the house." I've even heard, "Oh, I left my material at my last sales call." Now, can you imagine a great attorney showing up at court to file a motion without the motion? Or a doctor in surgery saying he left his scalpel at home? Or a preacher saying that he forgot his Bible? We would all find those funny, ridiculous, or impossible, but many times that's exactly what salespeople do. My friend Keith Pitts is the CEO of a large hospital chain, and he always says, "The devil's in the details." Going without all your material to a sales call is like playing golf without all your clubs. You know, sometimes you need the 4-iron to win the round. If you're gone from your home or office for a day or a week or even longer, make sure you have enough materials to get you back to the office or to your home. Spectacular performances are always preceded by unspectacular preparation. I so strongly believe that what you do before the actual performance in preparation is just as important as what you do in the performance, that I'm spending time on the foundations of a great performance before getting to the specifics of giving the presentation. Let's discuss the concept of creating a buying atmosphere. The buying atmosphere is an environment where the prospect feels comfortable to say both yes and no to your product. It's an atmosphere where, unlike many sales situations, potential buyers do not have the fear of getting sold and instead can focus on determining whether the product or service truly fits their needs. There is a natural resistance between prospect and salesperson. Some call it skepticism, healthy suspicion, or just plain mistrust. Most prospects are not saying to themselves, "Why should I buy?" They are saying, "Why shouldn't I buy?" Understand, this is a basic to understanding the psychology of selling. Everyone loves to buy, but people hate to be sold. When I describe a product I've purchased and totally love, I bought it. When I purchased a product that didn't work out as I'd planned, I got sold. I don't even mind paying too much if I buy it, but I hate to be sold an overpriced product. This is the difference between a buying atmosphere and a selling atmosphere. Although you may start out across the desk from your prospect, your goal should be to move around and sit on the same side of the desk as the prospect in a counselor role, as opposed to a sales role. A single phrase or a few sentences is sometimes all that separates the creation of a buying atmosphere from a selling atmosphere. For example, you walk into a retail clothing store and the clerk runs over and says, "May I help you? We have jeans on sale today. Can I show them to you?" Now, when this happens, you become immediately defensive and a selling atmosphere has been created. You reply, "No, I'm just looking." You went into the store with some purpose in mind, or maybe you just really wanted to browse, but you did not come into the store to engage in the selling process. On the other hand, when you walk into the same store and the salesperson walks up and says, "Hi, my name's Aaron. If you see anything you need help with, just let me know," the beginning of a buying atmosphere has been created. The question is, how do I create this buying atmosphere where I maintain control and yet the prospect feels in control? It certainly isn't easy. Millions of salespeople have taught prospects to expect a selling atmosphere. And there's a fine line between the prospect feeling controlled or in control. An old Italian man lived alone in the country and he wanted to dig his tomato garden. But it was very hard work, the ground was rock solid, and his only son Vincent, who used to help him dig his garden every year, was in prison. Well, the old man wrote a letter to his son and described his predicament. He said, "Dear Vincent, I'm feeling pretty badly because it looks like I won't be able to plant my tomato garden this year. I'm just getting too old to be digging up a garden plot on my own. I know if you were here, my troubles would be over. I know you'd be happy to dig the plot for me. Love, Dad." Well, a few days later, he received a letter from his son, Vincent, and it said, "Dear Dad, don't dig up the garden. That's where I buried the bodies. Love, Vinny." At 4 a.m. the next morning, FBI agents and local police stormed the property, dug up the entire area, and found no bodies. They apologized to the old man and left. That same day, the old man received another letter from his son. It read, "Dear Dad, go ahead and plant the tomatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Love, Vinny." There are some specific things you can do to create this buying atmosphere. The first is to believe the phrase, "Either way is fine with me." It's not something you just say, you must believe it. When you say it, repeat the following statement to yourself and believe it. It doesn't matter whether my prospects buy or not. It only matters that I help them make a decision about my product. I want them to buy, but I can't control that. I can only control my performance. If you believe their final decision truly matters to you, prospects will sense that, and the mistrust radar will go up. If they believe you honestly don't mind either way, they'll be less suspicious and less resistant to what you say. Picture yourself on the prospect side of the desk, because ultimately that's where you must be to create a buying atmosphere. Here are some great phrases I've used to build a buying atmosphere. Use them in your presentation. This may work for you, it may not. You'll have to decide that. I wouldn't want you to get this product unless you really thought you'd benefit from it. My job is to explain the product and let you decide whether it will help you. Somehow you must let the prospect know that it's okay to say no. It's not okay for the prospect to put you off, but it really is okay for them to say no. The first step in creating a buying atmosphere is to allow the prospect to feel in control and get the sense that he can decide against a purchase if he wants to. The second step in creating a buying atmosphere is to cultivate an environment where the prospect trusts you. Unless you're presenting to someone to whom you're related or someone who knows you very well, you have to do something or say something that builds this trust. Your appearance communicates a message about your trustworthiness to prospects. You've heard it said that first impressions are everything. You never get a second chance to make a good first impression. A prospect would probably not trust you in a ski mask carrying a gun. So if you agree there is an inappropriate appearance, the ski mask and gun look, then there must be a best appearance you can present as well. The best advice I can give is to dress like your prospect, or slightly better. In the banking industry, I wore a suit and tie for sales calls, just like I'm dressed today. And when I sold books door to door, I didn't wear a tie, but I also never wore a t-shirt and flip-flops. I tried to look acceptable to both the banker and to the housewife. Just ask yourself this: if I were the prospect, how would I want the salesperson calling on me to look? Also be critical of your appearance and try to improve it. Also ask yourself, does my competition look better than me? And be honest with yourself. When it comes to your words, there are two very powerful things to use when building trust. 1, other customers' names. 2, statements that put the prospect in control, such as, "This may fit or may not. That'll be for you to decide." The hardest part about making these trust statements is that old sales material and even some new material suggests that you must only make positive statements and always assume the prospect is going to buy. While it's true that you should always assume the prospect is buying and make assumptive statements, this should only happen after some level of trust in a buying atmosphere has been established. You may say one thing to the prospect to help him feel comfortable and at the same time silently believe he should and will buy. The greatest discovery I've made in improving the quality of my presentation is the power of establishing a buying atmosphere with what I call takeaways. These are phrases that literally take away the pressure on the prospect or the fear of getting sold. It's crucial to eliminate as much of the inherent tension and pressure as possible. There's an entire mental process that begins in the prospect's mind from the first word you utter and continues throughout every stage of interaction. Therefore, much of the sales process is like an internal tennis match, back and forth, in the prospect's mind. No matter what you're selling, prospects are silently asking themselves questions like these while you speak to them. Will I actually use this product if I buy it? Will I get the benefits claimed if I buy it? Will my friends or business peers say things about me if I buy it? Prospects may give no outward indications as to their thoughts, but that doesn't mean they aren't thinking it, because they are. To alleviate these doubts and the stress the prospect is experiencing, you create a buying atmosphere by letting the prospect feel in control and by helping the prospect trust you. The zen of control in a presentation is to be in control while making the prospect feel that they are the one behind the wheel. Anytime you mention well-known names of people who've bought your product or make statements that allow the prospect to feel in control, you create a buying atmosphere and give him the feeling that he has just sat down in the driver's seat. Another part of a buying atmosphere is just that, the atmosphere in which you're talking to your prospect. It needs to be a quiet place, void of a lot of distractions. It should be comfortable, not standing up or out in the hot sun. It should also be non-threatening to the prospect. The prospect must feel in control. So sometimes it helps if you meet on the prospect turf or at least neutral turf. When I have prospects come to my office, I make a comment about the atmosphere to try to relax them. For example, I might say something like, "I've asked you to come here so everyone in the office could gang up on you. Seriously, I won't ask you to make a decision today unless you want to. Does that sound fair?" This does a lot of things. It makes a joke out of what the prospects were already thinking, puts the prospects in control of the decision, and asks if it's fair. People love to be fair, and this gives them a chance to do that. Part of a buying atmosphere is where you make your presentation, and part of it is who is in the presentation. If you don't have all the decision makers present, you don't have a buying atmosphere, and the decision to buy simply can't be made. This is because the buying atmosphere is also determined by the prospect's ability to buy.